Hey everyone, in this video I want to give you 3 reasons why I think you should be shooting with vintage lenses. And at the end of this video I also want to give you a couple gold nuggets when it comes to manual focusing those vintage lenses, since I know that's one of the scariest things when it comes to adapting vintage lenses to your modern cameras. My love for vintage lenses started back when I was in college and I went to Value Village and I came across a bag with a camera. It had a camera, a bag, and 2 lenses only for $20. I thought I couldn't go wrong with trying them, so I purchased my first vintage lenses along with my camera for next to nothing. And this leads to my first reason why I think you should be shooting with vintage lenses, and that is that they are so cheap. You and I both know how expensive gear is. We end up buying cameras, autofocus lenses, like that one. You buy monitors, you got cameras, cases, audio gear, microphones, and it's all so much money. And vintage lenses, being one of the most fun things to use, ends up being one of the cheapest things that you can buy. Here I've got one of my favorite lenses, the Helios 44M. I love this lens, and I bought this lens for around $120, including the adapter. So I love it, super budget friendly. This lens, of course, here's the adapter. You do have to buy these adapters online, but it's pretty easy to do. All you have to do is find the converter. This one is an M42 to NEX, which would be my Sony camera. The M42 is the screw thread, so you have to screw it in and then adapt this to your camera. So that one there being $120, I also purchased this one here. This is the Canon FD line 24mm 2.8. I love this lens also. Great wide angle, has so much character. Great lens. I bought this probably around $130. And for the other lenses that I have, I've either spent $0 to about $50 in each lens, and this is because either someone has gifted it to me, or like my dad, sometimes he'll go to some vintage stores or thrift stores and he'll find these lenses for really cheap, like $5, $10, $15, and he'll buy them for me just, you know, without even asking, and just brings them to me, and I try adapting to my camera, and I've had so much fun trying to do that. The second reason why I think that you should be shooting with vintage lenses is because of their character. Their character is just so beautiful, and if you've ever shot with vintage lenses, you know exactly what I'm talking about. They are just built differently. Their optical imperfections is what brings so much of the character to your image, and it is just something that you cannot reproduce with modern glass. And I understand you can use filtration like diffusion filters, and I have a video and I use filtration all the time. Diffusion filters like the Cinebloom filter. I've got a video up here if you want to watch that. I love it. I use it all the time on my modern glass like that one. Or you can do some stuff in post, but it's just not the same. When you shoot with vintage lenses, there's just something so unique and special that it brings to your image. It reminds me of some of the Hollywood images that you might see in movies and you fall in love with, from anamorphic movies, where you've got soft edges, you've got flares, you've got weird fall off, like this Helios 44 that I have here. Another character I really like about vintage lenses is the blooming that happens, and this is similar to what would happen if you had a diffusion filter on your modern glass. For example, this Canon FD 24mm has some interesting, I don't even know what it would be on the inner elements. And when I bought it from the store, the lady said that that's just what happens to some old lenses. They just form these crystals on the inside, and that creates some interesting blooming. And what's so cool about all these vintage lenses is that they're all so different from each other. You never really know what to expect. If I buy another 24mm vintage lens, it would be completely different than this one. It would have different flaring, different blooming, different distortion, different bokeh. It's just, every single lens is so unique to itself, and that brings so much fun to your shooting. And that brings me to the last reason why I think that you should be using vintage lenses, and that's that they're just so much fun to use. As I said, some of the most fun that I've had shooting and filmmaking has been using vintage lenses. They're so much fun to use because it brings something that's just interesting to look at. And as you know and I know, we're always looking for something that's interesting to look at, whether that's the background, whether that's the subject, whether that's lighting, or a combination of all of them. But sometimes you can't control those things. So when you have a lens that just makes any image look interesting, sometimes using that is a little quick way to hack the image and make it look interesting or intentional even. Now with the whole manual focusing, I know that is the one drawback for using vintage lenses, and it's a drawback even today even after I've practiced with manual focusing, because sometimes it's just so much easier to use a autofocus lens like I'm using right now. It's a trade-off. It's something that you have to sacrifice in order to have some of the other things that you have, but it's also a positive if you learn how to do it, because it's a skill that you're going to be using for the rest of your life. So once you learn it and you adapt it, you're able to shoot in any environment. But as far as manual focusing, I'm going to give you 3 tips that I have learned that will help you when you're trying to use manual focus lenses. So the first one that applies to everything is just using a higher aperture. It will be easier to focus because the focal plane will be wider. That means that you can get more stuff in focus. So that's tip number 1, just put your aperture higher. That means smaller iris, higher number. So f4, f3.5, f5.6, something like that would help you to be able to shoot more stuff in focus, and it's going to be easier to focus. The second tip I have for you is to sometimes choose to focus on something that was not going to change. For example, if I'm shooting myself out and about and I know that I'm going to be changing in the scene, just focus on the background. Maybe that's the trees, the buildings, the city, and make myself be out of focus. And doing that, choosing to do that, is going to look intentional, and you're going to make sure that it's going to be in focus. So that's an easy way to make sure that it looks intentional and you don't have to nail the exact focus. It's just focus on the background and let yourself or the subject be out of focus. It's going to look intentional, like an artistic choice. So if it works with your story, with your video, that's an easy way to make sure that you get focus. And the last tip for you when shooting with vintage lenses and trying to manual focus is you have to have focus peaking. Focus peaking is that little red, blue, white, depending on what camera you have, little outline that you have when things are in focus. I have it on my camera, my LCD screen, all the time on, and it just helps so much with knowing what's in focus. If you have a monitor like myself, which also helps so much with manual focusing lenses, is turning the focus peaking on your monitor. I've actually learned this tip. I forget where I heard it. It was some kind of podcast from someone. But they had said that instead of using focus peaking on your monitor, a quick little thing that you can do that works actually even better is turning the sharpness way up on your monitor. I have it cranked to about +20 on my monitor, and what this does, it over sharpens the image, kind of like what I'm doing right now, and it creates this kind of fringing effect on anything that's really sharp. Because it's over sharpened, it kind of looks it kind of gives you a white glow around the things that are in focus. And maybe I'll make a whole separate video about this tip because it's just so useful. But it's something that you can look into if you have an external monitor, is crank that sharpness up all the way as much as you can. Maybe not all the way. Find a sweet spot where you can see the things that are in focus, and it creates a little bit of a white fringe around the things that are actually in focus. And if I missed any tips that you might have that you want to share, throw them down in the comments below. I'd love to see any tips that you guys know and that you guys use all the time when using manual focusing lenses. And thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to like the video. Also subscribe to the channel if you want to see other videos like this, filmmaking tutorials, or just as I document my life with my family. And again, I want to thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next video.